Insane. Hey, step back. Let me see your hands.
She's in cardiac arrest. I'm a physician. I'm doing CPR.
Keep your hands visible.
My hands are saving her life.
All right, keep going. EMS is en route.
Dr. Adrian Foster was jogging through Riverside Park on a Saturday morning when he saw a white woman collapse on the trail ahead of him, and without hesitation he dropped to his knees beside her, checked for a pulse, found she wasn't breathing, and immediately began performing CPR to save her life. A white woman watching from a nearby bench saw a black man kneeling over an unconscious white woman, and instead of asking what was happening or offering help, she pulled out her phone and called 911, screaming that a black man was attacking a woman in the park. When officers Greg Lawson and Daniel Cruz arrived and saw Dr. Foster performing chest compressions on the unconscious jogger, they didn't assess the situation or ask questions. They pepper-sprayed him in the face, mid-compression, tackled him off the woman, and when Adrian tried to explain that she was having a heart attack and that he was a doctor, Lawson told him to shut up and said, "It's always your kind committing these crimes." And Cruz added sarcastically, "Yeah, right, a doctor," before telling him he was going to jail for a long time. What officers Lawson and Cruz didn't know, what they would discover only when paramedics arrived moments later and confirmed that Dr. Foster had just saved the woman's life, was that they had just assaulted and arrested a board-certified emergency room physician, that their racist remarks and failure to assess the situation had nearly killed the woman he was trying to save, and that their actions would cost Officer Lawson his badge and result in a $1.1 million lawsuit that would become one of the most widely condemned examples of racially biased policing ever recorded. Before we go further, what city or country are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. We love seeing where you're tuning in from. And if you believe a black man performing CPR shouldn't be pepper-sprayed and arrested for saving a life, like this video and subscribe. Riverside Park on a Saturday morning in late May was exactly what a city park was supposed to be on a beautiful spring day. The running trail that looped around the park for 3 miles was busy with joggers moving at different paces, some fast and focused, others slower and more relaxed. Families walked dogs on the grass. Kids played on the playground near the north entrance. People sat on benches reading or scrolling through their phones. The sun was warm, but not too hot, and the air smelled like fresh-cut grass and the kind of morning that made people glad they lived in a place with parks like this. Dr. Adrian Foster ran the outer loop of the trail at a steady pace, his breathing controlled and even, his stride smooth from years of running this same road every Saturday morning. He was 38 years old, a board-certified emergency room physician at City General Hospital, and he had been working in emergency medicine for 10 years. He had seen just about everything a person could see in an ER. Trauma cases, cardiac arrests, overdoses, strokes, every kind of medical crisis that could walk through the doors or arrive by ambulance. He had performed CPR dozens of times, had saved lives that would have been lost without immediate intervention. And he had trained other doctors and nurses on how to respond when seconds mattered and hesitation meant death. Adrian wore black running shorts, a gray compression shirt, and well-worn running shoes that had logged hundreds of miles on this trail. His headphones were in, playing music that kept his pace steady, and he was thinking about nothing in particular except the rhythm of his breathing and the feeling of his legs moving beneath him. He had been running for about 25 minutes and was coming up on the 2-mile mark when he saw the woman ahead of him. She was a white woman in her mid-30s, wearing bright blue running gear, her blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail that swung with each stride. Adrian had passed her earlier on the trail going the opposite direction, and now she was about 20 feet ahead of him, moving at a pace slightly slower than his. He was getting ready to pass her on the left when her stride faltered. It happened fast. One moment she was running normally, and the next moment her legs buckled beneath her and she collapsed forward onto the pavement, her body hitting the ground hard with no attempt to catch herself. Adrian's medical training kicked in immediately. He pulled his headphones out and sprinted the 20 feet to where she had fallen. She was lying face down on the trail, completely motionless. Adrian dropped to his knees beside her and rolled her onto her back, his hands moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this exact sequence of movements countless times in the ER. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Adrian's voice was loud and clear, the kind of voice that cut through panic and focused attention. No response. He placed 2 fingers on her neck to check for a pulse. Nothing. He leaned close to her face to check for breathing. Her chest wasn't moving. No air coming from her nose or mouth. Cardiac arrest. Adrian didn't hesitate. He positioned himself over her, placed the heel of one hand on the center of her chest, placed his other hand on top of the first, and began chest compressions. He pressed down hard and fast, counting out loud as he worked. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. His compressions were deep and rhythmic, exactly as he had been trained, exactly as he had done in the ER when patients came in with no pulse and no breathing. After 30 compressions, he tilted her head back slightly, lifted her chin, pinched her nose, and gave 2 rescue breaths. Then he went back to compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Other joggers on the trail had stopped and were watching. Adrian looked up at them, his voice urgent. "Someone call 911. Tell them we have a woman in cardiac arrest at Riverside Park on the main trail." A man about 10 feet away pulled out his phone and dialed. Adrian kept doing compressions, focused entirely on keeping blood flowing to her brain until help arrived. He was sweating now, not from the run but from the physical effort of performing high-quality CPR. His arms were starting to burn, but he didn't slow down. Every compression mattered. Every second mattered. What Adrian didn't see was the woman sitting on a bench about 50 yards away who had been watching him since he first knelt down beside the collapsed jogger. Karen Whitmore was 52 years old, and she had been sitting on that bench for the past 20 minutes, scrolling through her phone and occasionally looking up to watch people go by. When she looked up and saw Adrian kneeling over the woman on the ground, her brain didn't process what was actually happening. She didn't see CPR. She didn't see a medical emergency. She saw a black man on top of a white woman who wasn't moving. Karen's heart started pounding. She stood up from the bench, her phone already in her hand, and she dialed 911. The dispatcher answered. 911, what's your emergency? Karen's voice came out high and panicked. There's a black man attacking a woman in Riverside Park. He's on top of her. She's not moving. You need to send someone right now. The dispatcher's voice stayed calm and professional. Ma'am, what is the man doing? Is he hitting her? I don't know. He's just on top of her. She's not moving. Please hurry. We're sending officers now. Stay on the line. Are you in a safe location? Yes, but you need to hurry. He's still on top of her. The call was recorded and logged at 10:47 a.m. 4 minutes later, a police cruiser pulled into the park entrance with lights flashing. Officers Greg Lawson and Daniel Cruz had received the dispatch call describing an assault in progress. Black male suspect on top of a white female victim at Riverside Park main trail. Lawson was 36 years old with 11 years on the force, and Cruz was 28 with 5 years of experience. Both of them had been patrolling the area when the call came through, and they had responded immediately. As they drove into the park, they could see a small crowd of people gathered near the trail. Lawson spotted Adrian kneeling over the woman, his hands on her chest, moving up and down in what Lawson should have recognized as chest compressions but didn't, because he had already decided what he was looking at based on the dispatch call. Lawson and Cruz got out of the car and approached quickly. Adrian was still performing CPR, still counting compressions out loud, completely focused on keeping the woman alive. Lawson pulled out his pepper spray as he got closer, and Cruz's hand moved to his service weapon. Neither of them said a word. Neither of them asked what was happening. Neither of them assessed whether the woman was in medical distress. They just acted. Lawson sprayed Adrian directly in the face from less than 3 feet away. The pain was immediate and overwhelming. Adrian's hands flew to his face and he screamed, falling backward off the woman and onto the pavement. His eyes were on fire, his skin burning, and he couldn't see anything through the tears and the chemical burn. Cruz moved in immediately, grabbed Adrian by the arms, and slammed him face down onto the ground. Adrian was still trying to speak through the pain, his voice breaking. "She's having a heart attack. She needs CPR. I'm a doctor." Lawson's voice came from above him, cold and dismissive. "Shut up. It's always your kind committing these crimes." Adrian tried again, desperate now, because he knew the woman on the ground wasn't getting the CPR she needed, and every second without it reduced her chances of survival. "I'm a doctor. She's in cardiac arrest. Someone needs to do CPR." Cruz laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. "Yeah, right. A doctor. Sure you are." Lawson pulled Adrian's arms behind his back and snapped handcuffs onto his wrists with enough force to leave marks. Then he leaned down close to Adrian's ear, his voice low and certain. "You're going to jail for a long time." Adrian lay on the pavement with his face burning from the pepper spray, his wrists locked in handcuffs, and the woman he had been trying to save lying motionless on the ground a few feet away with no one performing CPR. And then he heard the sound of an ambulance siren getting closer. The ambulance pulled up to the scene 30 seconds after officers Greg Lawson and Daniel Cruz had handcuffed Dr. Adrian Foster and left him lying face down on the pavement with his eyes still burning from the pepper spray. Two paramedics jumped out of the ambulance and ran toward the crowd of people gathered near the trail, and the first thing they saw was a woman lying on her back on the ground, with no one performing CPR on her. The lead paramedic, a man named Jason Rivera, who had worked emergency medicine for 15 years, dropped to his knees beside the woman and immediately checked for a pulse. It was there, but it was weak and irregular. He looked at his partner and spoke quickly. "She's got a pulse, but it's unstable. Get the AED ready." His partner pulled out the automated external defibrillator and started setting it up while Jason began chest compressions. After 30 compressions, he paused and looked around at the crowd of witnesses standing nearby. "Who was doing CPR on her before we got here?" Multiple people pointed at Adrian, who was still on the ground in handcuffs with officers Lawson and Cruz standing over him. Jason looked at Adrian, then at the officers, and his expression shifted from confusion to anger. "Why did you stop him? She's in cardiac arrest. Every second without CPR reduces her chance of survival." Lawson's voice was defensive. "We got a call about an assault. He was on top of her. We had to secure the suspect." Jason stared at him for a moment like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. An assault? He was doing CPR. "Look at her. She collapsed. She's not breathing on her own. He was saving her life." Cruz stepped forward, his tone still dismissive. "We were responding to a 911 call. The caller said he was attacking her." Adrian's voice came from the ground, hoarse and strained from the pepper spray, but still trying to make them understand. "I'm Dr. Adrian Foster. I'm an emergency room physician at City General Hospital. I saw her collapse. She had no pulse. I started CPR immediately. She's in cardiac arrest." Jason looked at Adrian more closely and recognition crossed his face. "Dr. Foster, I've worked with you. You've been at City General for years." He turned back to Lawson and his voice got harder. "You just pepper sprayed and arrested a doctor who was performing CPR. Do you understand what you've done?" Lawson didn't answer. His face had gone pale and he was starting to realize that he had made a serious mistake. Jason's partner had the AED pads on the woman's chest now, and the machine was analyzing her heart rhythm. The automated voice came through clearly. "Shock advised. Stand clear." Everyone stepped back and the machine delivered a shock. The woman's body jerked slightly and then the AED started analyzing again. After a few seconds, the voice came back. "Shock advised. Stand clear." Another shock. This time, when the AED analyzed her rhythm, it gave a different message. "No shock advised. Check pulse." Jason checked her pulse again, and this time it was stronger and more regular. He looked at Adrian, still handcuffed on the ground, and spoke directly to him. "Her heart's back in rhythm. You saved her life, doctor. If you hadn't started CPR when you did, she'd be dead right now." Adrian didn't respond. He was still in too much pain from the pepper spray, and he was trying to process the fact that he had been assaulted and arrested for trying to save someone's life. The witnesses who had been standing around watching the entire incident started speaking up now, their voices overlapping as they tried to tell the paramedics and the officers what had actually happened. "She collapsed right in front of him. He didn't attack her. He was helping her. We saw the whole thing. He was doing CPR. He was counting compressions out loud. He told someone to call 911. He was trying to save her." The officers just came up and sprayed him without asking any questions. An older man who had been jogging nearby pulled out his phone and held it up. "I recorded part of it. I've got video of him doing CPR, and I've got video of the officers spraying him." Cruz turned to look at the man, and his expression showed that he understood exactly how bad this was about to get. Jason stood up from where he was kneeling beside the woman and walked over to where Adrian was still on the ground. He looked at Lawson. "Uncuff him, right now." Lawson hesitated for just a second and Jason's voice got louder. "I said uncuff him. He's a doctor. He just saved this woman's life, and you assaulted him for it." Lawson pulled out his keys and unlocked the handcuffs. Adrian brought his arms forward slowly, his wrists red and bruised from how tightly the cuffs had been applied. Jason helped him sit up and immediately started flushing his eyes with water from a bottle he pulled from the ambulance. Adrian's eyes were still streaming tears from the pepper spray, and his voice was rough when he spoke. "How is she?" Jason answered while still rinsing Adrian's eyes. "She's stable. Her heart restarted. We're transporting her to City General. But you did everything right, doctor. You gave her the best chance she had." Adrian nodded, still blinking against the pain. Then he looked at Lawson and Cruz, and his voice came out cold and deliberate. "I want your names and badge numbers, both of you." Lawson tried to respond, his tone shifting to something that might have been an attempt at an apology. "Sir, we were responding to a call. We didn't know." Adrian cut him off. "You didn't ask." You saw a black man, and you assumed I was attacking her. You didn't assess the situation. You didn't look at what I was doing. You just saw my skin color and decided I was a criminal. He looked at Cruz. And when I told you I was a doctor, you laughed at me. You said, yeah, right, a doctor like that was impossible. Like a black man couldn't possibly be a physician. Cruz didn't have an answer for that. Karen Whitmore, the woman who had made the 911 call, was still standing near her bench about 50 yards away. One of the witnesses pointed her out to the paramedics. She's the one who called the police. She's the one who said he was attacking the woman. Adrian looked over at Karen, and she took a step back, her face flushing. Adrian's voice was quiet but carried across the distance between them. You saw me doing CPR and you called the police? You didn't come over to ask what was happening? You didn't try to help? You just assumed I was attacking her? Karen's voice came out defensively and shaking. I saw you on top of her. She wasn't moving. I didn't know what you were doing. I was saving her life, Adrian said, and you almost got me killed for it. Jason finished rinsing Adrian's eyes and helped him stand up. Adrian was unsteady on his feet, still affected by the pepper spray, but he stayed upright. He looked at Lawson again. I'm calling my attorney. I'm requesting the 911 call recording. I'm requesting all body cam footage from both of you. And I'm filing a federal lawsuit for assault, excessive force, and violation of my civil rights. Lawson opened his mouth to say something, but Adrian wasn't finished. I'm a doctor. I took an oath to save lives, and today I did exactly that. And your response was to pepper spray me, tackle me, handcuff me, and tell me I was going to jail for a long time, all because you saw a black man and couldn't imagine any other scenario except that I was committing a crime. The paramedics were loading the woman onto a stretcher now, preparing to transport her to the hospital. Jason looked at Adrian one more time. Do you need medical attention, doctor? Your eyes are going to be irritated for a while. Adrian shook his head. I'll get checked out at the hospital, but right now I need to make some phone calls. He pulled out his phone, and the first call he made was to his attorney. Dr. Adrian Foster sat in the emergency room at City General Hospital 3 hours after being pepper sprayed and arrested for saving a woman's life. And the nurse who was treating his eyes kept shaking her head in disbelief as he told her what had happened. His eyes were still red and irritated from the chemical burns, and his wrists had deep bruises from the handcuffs. But the physical pain wasn't what bothered him the most. What bothered him was the knowledge that if he had been a white man performing CPR, none of this would have happened. The woman he had saved, whose name was Sarah Mitchell, was in a room 2 floors above him recovering from the cardiac arrest. The cardiologist who examined her had confirmed what Adrian already knew. She had suffered a sudden cardiac event caused by an undiagnosed heart condition, and without immediate CPR, she would have died on that trail. The cardiologist came down to the ER specifically to find Adrian and thank him personally. You saved her life, Dr. Foster. The paramedics told me you started compressions within seconds of her collapse. That's the only reason she's alive. Her brain function is intact. Her heart is stable. She's going to make a full recovery because of you. Adrian nodded, but the gratitude felt hollow when he thought about what had happened afterward. His attorney, Marcus Reed, arrived at the hospital within an hour of Adrian's call. Marcus was a civil rights attorney with 20 years of experience handling cases of police misconduct, and when Adrian described what had happened, Marcus immediately began the process of securing evidence. The first piece of evidence was the 911 call. Marcus requested it through official channels, and the police department was required to provide it within 48 hours. When Marcus played the recording for Adrian 2 days later, the bias was undeniable. Karen Whitmore's voice, panicked and frantic, described a black man attacking a white woman in the park. The dispatcher asked if the man was hitting the woman or if she was conscious, and Karen responded that she didn't know, but that he's on top of her and she's not moving. At no point in the call did Karen mention that the man might be helping the woman. At no point did she describe CPR. She saw a black man on top of a white woman, and her brain filled in the rest with assumptions rooted in racial bias. The second piece of evidence was the body cam footage from officers Greg Lawson and Daniel Cruz. Marcus obtained it through a formal discovery request, and what the footage showed was damning. The video started with the officers pulling up to the park and seeing Adrian performing chest compressions on Sarah Mitchell. There was no audio of the officers discussing what they were seeing or attempting to assess the situation. They simply got out of the car and approached with pepper spray and hands-on weapons. The footage showed Lawson spraying Adrian in the face while Adrian was mid-compression. It showed Cruz tackling Adrian to the ground. And most importantly, it captured the audio of what the officers said after Adrian identified himself as a doctor. Adrian's voice on the recording, desperate and strained. "I'm a doctor. She's in cardiac arrest. Someone needs to do CPR." Lawson's response, "Shut up. It's always your kind committing these crimes." Adrian again, "I'm a doctor. She's having a heart attack." Cruz's voice mocking and sarcastic, "Yeah, right. A doctor. Sure you are." And then Lawson's final statement before the paramedics arrived, "You're going to jail for a long time." Marcus played the footage twice, and both times Adrian felt the same surge of anger and humiliation. The officers hadn't just made a mistake. They had made racist assumptions, verbalized those assumptions, and then doubled down even when Adrian told them the truth. The third piece of evidence was witness testimony. Multiple joggers who had been on the trail that morning provided statements confirming that they had seen Sarah collapse, that Adrian had immediately begun CPR, and that the officers had pepper sprayed and arrested him without assessing the situation. One witness, the older man who had recorded part of the incident on his phone, provided video footage showing Adrian performing textbook CPR while counting compressions out loud. Marcus compiled all of the evidence into a case file and met with Adrian in his office 1 week after the incident. He laid the file on the desk between them and spoke with the calm confidence of someone who knew exactly how strong his case was. "This is one of the clearest examples of racial profiling and excessive force I've ever seen. You were performing a medical procedure to save someone's life, and you were assaulted for it. The 911 call was based on racial bias. The officers didn't assess the situation. They used force without justification, and their verbal statements were explicitly racist." Marcus paused and looked directly at Adrian. "We're filing a federal lawsuit. Excessive force, assault, violation of civil rights, racial discrimination, and we're seeking $1.1 million in damages." Adrian nodded. "Do it." The lawsuit was filed 2 weeks after the incident, and the story broke in the local news within hours. The headlines were brutal and accurate. Doctor pepper sprayed while performing CPR. Officers arrest physician saving woman's life. Racist remarks captured on bodycam during medical emergency. The city's response was immediate damage control. The police department released a statement saying the incident was under investigation and that they took all allegations of misconduct seriously. But the statement did nothing to slow the public outrage that followed. Sarah Mitchell, the woman Adrian had saved, regained full consciousness 3 days after the cardiac arrest, when the doctors explained what had happened. That a man had performed the CPR on her after she collapsed, and that police had arrested him for it. She was horrified. She asked to meet Adrian, and the hospital arranged it. Sarah walked into Adrian's office at City General with tears already streaming down her face. She was 34 years old, a marketing executive with no prior history of heart problems, and she had no memory of collapsing on the trail or anything that happened afterward. All she knew was that a stranger had saved her life and had been punished for it. "Dr. Foster, I don't even know how to begin to thank you. The cardiologist told me that without CPR I would have died. My brain would have been damaged even if my heart had restarted later. You saved my life." Adrian stood up from his desk and shook her hand. "I'm glad you're okay. That's what matters." Sarah shook her head, still crying. "But they arrested you. They pepper sprayed you while you were trying to save me. I can't believe that happened." Adrian's voice was quiet. "It happened because they saw a black man and assumed the worst. They didn't see a doctor. They didn't see someone performing CPR. They just saw my skin color and decided I was a criminal." Sarah looked at him with an expression that combined gratitude and guilt. "I'm testifying on your behalf. Whatever you need. I'll tell everyone what you did for me. I'll make sure people know you're a hero." And she did exactly that. Sarah gave interviews to local news stations. She wrote an op-ed for the city newspaper. She appeared at a press conference with Adrian and his attorney and told the world that Dr. Adrian Foster had saved her life and had been treated like a criminal for doing so. The pressure on the police department became unbearable. Officer Greg Lawson was placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of the internal investigation. The body cam footage was released to the public, and the racist remarks he and Officer Cruz had made were played on every news station in the city. And the case that had started with a man trying to save a life had become a national story about how racial bias can literally stop someone from helping another human being. The internal investigation into Officers Greg Lawson and Daniel Cruz moved quickly because the evidence was so overwhelming that the police department had no choice but to act decisively. The body cam footage showing Lawson pepper spraying Dr. Adrian Foster while he was performing CPR, combined with the audio of both officers making racist remarks, left no room for defense or justification. The 911 call from Karen Whitmore revealed that the entire incident had been triggered by racial bias and the witness testimony confirmed that Adrian had done nothing wrong and had in fact saved Sarah Mitchell's life. Officer Greg Lawson was terminated 4 weeks after the incident. The official findings stated that he had used excessive force without assessing the situation, had pepper sprayed a civilian who was performing life-saving medical care, had made explicitly racist statements that were captured on bodycam, and had violated multiple department policies regarding use of force and professional conduct. Lawson was 36 years old with 11 years of service, and his law enforcement career was over. His termination was made public, and his name became permanently attached to one of the most widely condemned examples of racially biased policing in the city's history. Officer Daniel Cruz was suspended for 60 days without pay and placed on probation for 1 year. While he had not been the one to deploy the pepper spray, he had participated in the assault, had tackled Adrian to the ground, and had made the sarcastic remark mocking Adrian's claim that he was a doctor. The department determined that Cruz's actions, while less severe than Lawson's, still constituted a failure to properly assess the situation and demonstrated bias that violated department standards. The federal lawsuit filed by Dr. Adrian Foster against officers Lawson and Cruz, and the city moved through the legal system with unusual speed. The city's attorneys reviewed the evidence. The body cam footage, the 911 call, the witness statements, Sarah Mitchell's testimony, and the medical records confirming that Adrian had saved her life, and made the calculation that no jury would side with the defendants. A doctor performing CPR had been pepper sprayed and arrested while saving a woman's life, and the officers had made racist remarks that were recorded on their own body cams. The case was indefensible. The city settled the lawsuit for $1.1 million within 7 months. The settlement included not just monetary compensation but a comprehensive list of mandatory reforms. The police department was required to implement new training on recognizing medical emergencies, establish protocols requiring officers to assess situations before using force, create an independent review board to investigate all use of force incidents involving racial bias allegations, and conduct quarterly audits of body cam footage to identify patterns of discriminatory behavior. Karen Whitmore, the woman who had made the 911 call, faced no criminal charges because calling 911 in good faith is legally protected even when the caller is wrong. However, once her identity was revealed through the lawsuit discovery process, she faced severe social consequences. Her employer, a financial services company, terminated her employment after determining that her actions reflected poorly on the company's values. She was publicly identified in news reports as the person whose racially biased 911 call had triggered the assault on a doctor saving a life, and her name became synonymous with the dangers of racial profiling by civilians. The case had a ripple effect that extended far beyond the individuals involved. Police departments across the country began using the body cam footage as a training example of how racial bias can cause officers to misinterpret life-saving actions as criminal behavior. Medical associations issued statements highlighting the incident as an example of how racial profiling endangers public health by discouraging bystanders from providing emergency medical assistance. Dr. Adrian Foster used a portion of the settlement to establish a scholarship fund for minority students pursuing careers in emergency medicine. He continued working as an emergency room physician at City General Hospital and became a vocal advocate for police reform and awareness of racial bias in emergency situations. He gave interviews, spoke at conferences, and shared his story to highlight how deeply ingrained racial bias can be, and how it can literally prevent someone from saving a life without fear of being treated as a criminal. Sarah Mitchell made a full recovery from her cardiac arrest and became one of Adrian's most vocal supporters. She testified at city council meetings about the need for police reform, wrote opinion pieces about how Adrian had saved her life and been punished for it, and worked with Adrian to advocate for better training on recognizing medical emergencies. She credited Adrian not just with saving her life, but with opening her eyes to the reality of how black people are treated in situations where white people would never face suspicion. 5 years later, the reforms implemented as part of the settlement remain in place. Officers responding to emergency calls are now required to assess whether a medical situation is in progress before assuming criminal activity. The Independent Review Board has investigated dozens of use-of-force incidents and forced accountability in cases that previously would have been dismissed. Greg Lawson has not worked in law enforcement since his termination and now works in warehouse logistics. Daniel Cruz completed his probation and remains with the department but has not been promoted. The body cam footage of Adrian being pepper sprayed while performing CPR is now one of the most widely viewed examples of racial bias in policing. It is shown in police academies, medical schools, and civil rights workshops as a clear demonstration of how assumptions based on race can override common sense, endanger lives, and result in the assault of someone performing a heroic act. The lesson was expensive, public, and permanent. Performing CPR while black should not result in assault and arrest. A 911 call based on racial bias can trigger a police response that treats a hero as a criminal, and officers who fail to assess situations before using force will face consequences that include termination, lawsuits, and national condemnation. Dr. Adrian Foster never received an apology from Greg Lawson, but he received something more important: justice, reform, and a $1.1 million settlement that sent a clear message. Racial bias has consequences, and those consequences are severe. If you believe a doctor saving a life shouldn't be pepper sprayed and called a criminal, share this story. What training do you think police need to prevent racial bias from overriding assessment in emergencies? Drop your answer in the comments. And if this story reminded you that heroes come in all colors and that assumptions can literally stop someone from saving a life, subscribe. We're not stopping until every person can help another human being without fear of being treated like a threat. Asterisk.